Panama and Suez are two of the most extraordinary engineering achievements in human history. One carved a path through a continent. The other linked two seas that had never touched. Together, they reshaped the world. But that foundation is starting to crack. Panama is discovering that its locks only work as long as the rain keeps falling. After recent droughts forced it to slash daily transits, the country is now racing to build a new reservoir and tunnel system just to keep the canal supplied with enough fresh water to function. Suez, meanwhile, completed a massive expansion less than a decade ago to push more ships through faster. But it sits next to a region where instability keeps creeping back. A perfectly built sea-level canal can still be slowed or even shut down by something as small and unpredictable as a drone flying overhead. When either of these routes slows down, the shock reverberates across the entire world. And whenever the old shortcuts start to fail, the world looks for new ones. This time, where they're looking was hidden for centuries under the ice. A route so direct it undercuts both Panama and Suez on distance and skirts their choke points entirely. Now, for the first time in history, that route is opening. This is the story of the route that could kill the Panama and Suez canals. To understand why that Arctic route suddenly matters, we have to start in Panama. In 2023 and 2024, droughts dropped the level of Gatun Lake so much that the Canal Authority had to cut daily transits from about 36 down into the high teens, or risk running the whole system dry. Ships waited in line for weeks. Draft limits were lowered, billions of dollars in cargo sat at anchor doing nothing. All because this canal depends on one thing: rain. By late 2025, the rains have returned, but nobody is relaxed. The shipping industry knows this can happen again. Panama is now putting about $1.6 billion into the Rio Indio Reservoir, a new dam and tunnel system designed to bring more fresh water into the canal basin and secure its water supply for the next 50 years. On paper, it sounds like the solution. In reality, there's a big gap. Construction is only expected to start in 2027 and finish in 2032. That leaves around 6 years where Panama is vulnerable to more traffic cuts and delays. So while Panama is trying to fix its water problem with a new megaproject, entire nations are looking at the map and asking a simple question: what's the next best way to move between the Pacific and the Atlantic? That's where the Northwest Passage comes in. So what does this route actually look like today? Each summer, the ice pulls back long enough to create a clear window, roughly from late July to early October, when ships can move through these channels with ice-strengthened hulls and careful planning. And during that window, the advantages are real. When China's Shui-Long icebreaker tested the Northwest Passage, officials compared a run from Shanghai to New York. The traditional route through the Panama Canal is about 10,500 nautical miles. Using the Northwest Passage, the distance drops to around 8,600 nautical miles. That's roughly 1,900 nautical miles shorter, and Chinese reports say it can cut about 7 days off the voyage. On a large container ship, a week less at sea is not just a line on a map. It can mean around $1 million or more in saved time and fuel on a full-load voyage, plus faster delivery and a ship that gets back to its next paying job sooner. And ships are using this window. Not in huge numbers yet, but in meaningful, repeatable ways. Ice-class bulk carriers move zinc, nickel and supplies for northern mines. Specialized vessels built by companies like Royal Wagenborg use double-acting hulls designed to go bow first in open water and stern first through ice to make these trips without escorts. Expedition cruise ships, research vessels and private operators also pass through each summer. These aren't experiments anymore. They're controlled, safe transit through a corridor that didn't exist in practical terms just a generation ago. Now, every year more of the Arctic is charted, more ships are built for ice, and more governments are investing in northern infrastructure. And that's where the story moves next. If the Northwest Passage is the shortcut, Canada and the United States are now working on the support system around it: ports, rail lines, bases, and icebreakers. On the Canadian side, the most important piece is Churchill, Manitoba. It's the only rail-connected deep-water port on the North American Arctic coast. Grain, critical minerals and other cargo can move by train from the prairies straight to Hudson Bay, then sail out into the North Atlantic without touching the Great Lakes or the St. Lawrence Seaway. After years of problems with the rail line, Churchill is now being rebuilt as a northern trade hub. The federal government has confirmed around $180 million over 5 years to strengthen the Hudson Bay Railway and expand the port. Manitoba is adding tens of millions more. Further east, there's Nanisivik on Baffin Island. On paper, Nanisivik is a fully operational Arctic naval station. In reality, it's becoming a seasonal refueling point for Canadian patrol ships. This station gives Canada a place to refuel and show the flag in the high Arctic, which matters if more ships keep coming through. On the US side, the key point on the map is Nome, Alaska. Right now, Nome's harbour is shallow, about 22 feet deep, which limits the size of ships that can safely dock there. Larger vessels and heavy icebreakers often have to stay offshore and lighter cargo in by barge. That's what the Port of Nome expansion is trying to change. In August 2025, the US Army Corps of Engineers awarded a $399.4 million contract for Phase 1A of the project. This phase will extend the main causeway by about 1,200 feet, add a new dock face, and begin the work needed to deepen the harbour toward 40 feet, enough for larger Coast Guard cutters, resupply ships, and eventually more serious Arctic traffic. The goal is to make Nome the first true US Arctic deep draft port by the end of the decade. Ports alone aren't enough. You also need ships that can work in ice. For decades, the US Arctic icebreaker fleet has been thin. Now the fleet is finally growing. A new polar security cutter heavy icebreaker is under construction in Mississippi. The Coast Guard has bought and is converting a commercial icebreaking ship, now renamed Storis, to act as a medium polar icebreaker based in Alaska from 2026. On top of that, the US has agreed a major deal with Finland to add up to 11 Arctic security cutter vessels in the coming years, with the first delivered before 2030. Put together, this means the US is moving from one aging heavy icebreaker toward a real fleet that can patrol, escort and support traffic in the Western Arctic. While North America is still building around its Arctic route, on the other side of the pole, Russia and China are already running a seasonal shipping corridor along Russia's northern coast. To understand why that matters, we have to look at the canal they're competing with. For trade between Europe and Asia, Suez is what Panama is for the Americas. The main shortcut everything was built around. Container services, car carriers and energy shipments from the Gulf all rely on that single channel between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. For years, the big question around Suez was how to push more ships through it, which is why Egypt spent about $8 to $9 billion on the new Suez Canal expansion in 2015, digging a parallel lane and deepening parts of the old one to allow more two-way traffic and cut transit times. So for now, the problem isn't capacity, it's risk. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, which began in late 2023, didn't disappear. They settled into a kind of permanent threat. By 2026, many major carriers had normalized the idea of sailing around the Cape of Good Hope instead, accepting extra days at sea to avoid the danger. Traffic through Suez fell by well over half, and Egypt's canal revenues dropped by more than 60% in a single year. The choke point here isn't the canal itself, it's the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at the southern entrance, where missiles, drones and insurance underwriters effectively decide who sails and who turns away. One hit on a $200 million 20,000 container ship can turn into a global shipping story overnight. The industry has made a simple calculation. If the risk stays this high, the old shortcut is no longer the obvious choice, even when it's faster on paper. That's why China and Russia are putting so much effort into their own Arctic corridor, the Northern Sea Route, a route that can move the same Europe-Asia trade without going anywhere near Suez or the Red Sea. The Northern Sea Route stretches from the Bering Strait in the east to the Barents Sea in the west. Unlike the narrow channels of the Northwest Passage, this is a wide corridor running along Siberia, big, open, and by November 2025, fully operational. The numbers speak for themselves. In 2023, cargo volumes through the NSR reached 36 million tons. We're not talking one-off bulk shipments. The regular traffic is LNG tankers, container ships, oil carriers, timber freighters. The Kremlin aims for millions of tons, and though they haven't hit it yet, month after month, traffic is climbing. Why is the NSR thriving when Panama and Suez are struggling? Because it offers something those old canals can't. A real alternative when choke points fail. A voyage from St. Petersburg to Shanghai via the NSR takes 20 to 22 days. And this isn't a niche route for thrill-seeking captains, it's becoming a supply chain. Container volumes between Russia and China doubled in 2025, exceeding 200,000 TEU, auto parts, consumer goods, timber, machinery. This is real commerce, not just bulk minerals. The next one is China's Arctic bet. The commercial engine here isn't Western. Maersk, MSC, CMA, CGM all have left the Russian market due to sanctions. The engine is Chinese, and it's called New Shipping. By 2025, New operates a regular seasonal liner service along the NSR. Their vessels are ice-strengthened feeders, smaller but tougher, built to handle ice with Russian nuclear icebreaker escorts. These ships are busy. In 2025, New Polar Bear arrived in Arkhangelsk, carrying 497 containers of Chinese goods, then loaded with Russian timber for the return to Shanghai. This two-way loop, the manufactured goods heading north and raw materials heading south, is the heartbeat of the NSR. Beijing calls it the Polar Silk Road, a trade corridor immune to American naval interdiction at Malacca or disruptions at Suez. These aren't rare experimental trips. They're regular, scheduled, with dedicated port berths and published rate cards. Infrastructure in motion. Then beneath the legitimate traffic lies something darker. After US and EU sanctions on Russia's Arctic LNG 2 project in 2023-24, analysts expected exports to collapse. They didn't. They went underground. In 2025-26, a fleet of obscure vessels with opaque ownership appeared near the Utranai terminal in Ob Bay. Pioneer, Asia Energy, Everest Energy. Many turned off their AIS transponders or spoofed signals while loading LNG, then offloaded cargo to non-ice class ships to hide the origin before reaching Asia. It's lucrative and dangerous. Older ships, minimal insurance, harsh Arctic conditions. Now the entire NSR ecosystem, such as Chinese container ships, the shadow fleet, and LNG exports, depends on one thing: Russia's nuclear icebreaker fleet, run by Rosatom. As of 2025, Russia operates 4 modern nuclear icebreakers of the Project 22220 Arktika class: Arktika, Sibir, Ural, and Yakutia. A 5th, Chukotka, is being fitted out, with its nuclear core ready. These ships can break through 3 meters of solid ice continuously, operate in deep oceans or shallow estuaries, and because they're nuclear, they have essentially unlimited range. They escort convoys, creating a moving channel of open water. Russia's goal? Move from seasonal navigation, July to November, to year-round operation for ice-strengthened vessels. 2 more icebreakers, Leningrad and Stalingrad, are under construction. Contrast this with North America. The US is keeping one 50-year-old icebreaker running by cannibalizing its sister ship, while Russia fields 4 nuclear giants and has 3 more on the way. In the Eurasian Arctic, Russia sets the rules, charges the fees, and controls access. Everyone else is a guest. So here's where things stand. Canada and the US are finally building ports, rail links, and icebreakers. The Northwest Passage is slowly starting to take shape. Across the pole, the Northern Sea Route is already moving tens of millions of tons a year, with regular services, nuclear icebreaker escorts, and a growing chain of ports. Russia wants a way around Western choke points. China wants trade routes that don't depend on Suez or the US Navy. Both are getting what they want in the Arctic. Meanwhile, the old routes are under pressure. The Arctic routes aren't ready yet, but they're no longer theory. Ships are moving, ports are growing, and more of the world's trade map now brushes the top of the globe. Today, the shortest path between oceans doesn't always cross a canal. Sometimes it crosses the ice. So what do you think? Will the Arctic routes kill Panama and Suez? Should Canada and the US double down on the Northwest Passage? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you're subscribed to Megabuilds for more stories about the projects reshaping our world. Thank you for watching it, and see you in the next one.